Welcome back to another video here on Anth.Tech. In this video, I'm taking a look at the iPhone X. Now, when the phone first released about 2 months ago, I just did a top 3 video on the top 3 features of this phone. But in this video, I'm taking a look at 10 weeks later about how I like this phone between Face ID and many other design cues and features that this phone has compared to, say, the 7 Plus or 8 Plus. So let's go and dive into the video. First up is the design. Here is the iPhone X in space gray. And as you can tell, the glass here is practically a mirror and is also a fingerprint magnet. But the dark lens stainless steel bezel looks great and pulls off the industrial vibe, which is also pretty neat. On the bottom, we've got the speaker grill and lightning port, no headphone jack. On the right is just a power button. On the top is nothing. Along the left side is the classic mute switch, which is probably one of the most useful tabs on this phone. And then below that is the volume rocker. Next up is the display, and the one on here, in one word, is stunning. Mainly because of the fact that it is OLED with the deep blacks and the bright whites. But as you may know if you're an iPhone user, there is a new night shift mode, which definitely warms up the color temperature of the display, which is pretty good if you're in like a dark environment. But there is a new feature called True Tone, which changes the color temperature depending on the surrounding environment. But now right now I'm in the studio lights, which is pretty cool at 5600 Kelvin, so there's pretty much no difference within the camera. Here you can see the color shift on the display with just a white background, which is not that bad like a Pixel 2 XL. You'll never really notice it, and I have a screenshot on, which might be messing it up. Then the notch. Now when you use the phone, it melts away, and if anyone has told you otherwise, they have not held it or used it. The notch is only there if you pay attention to it, and if you're showing someone. Other than that, you'll never get bothered by it, and I would not worry about it. And here is the bottom bezel, which is just melting over the edge, which looks great. Next up is the performance. Now the performance on here is really important to a good phone, and the iPhone X does not lack here. The Apple A11 Bionic chip is very powerful, scoring a 4,229 on single core, and then a whopping 10,229 on multi-core score, which is almost comparable to, say, a low-end MacBook, which is really good. Now this phone also has 3 GB of RAM, and I say 3 like it's weak, and some phones like the OnePlus 5T can go up to a whopping 8 GB of RAM, but iOS really knows how to manage it, and it can breeze through with 8 GB of RAM, which is great. And when force closing an app here like Twitter, and then relaunching it, it is super fast and pretty much no wait time. Now as you may know, this phone does have a new feature called Face ID, which has maybe failed me less than 5 times since I got it on release date, which was November 3rd. So that's really good and beats out Touch ID and any other method of unlocking. There's practically no thought into it, and once you swipe, you're in. Definitely my new favorite feature of this phone, and here are the sensors that help make Face ID work. Also here is the speaker test, as there are now 2 speakers, one on the top and then one on the bottom. Next up is the camera with its dual lens system, which is very easy to zoom in and out of in the camera app, but by swiping up and holding, then going into settings, then camera settings, for video resolutions there are a few options here of 720p at 30 frames per second, 1080p at 30 and 60 frames per second, and then there is 4K at 24, 30, and a whopping 60 frames per second, which is unheard of in any smartphone that I'm aware of. Then for slow-mo, there are 2 options, which are 1080p at 120 frames per second, then again a whopping 240 frames per second, which is just awesome for getting the slow-mo shots. Then because there's now such a high frame rate and more added detail, Apple had to make a new file format which compresses it without any loss in quality, which is good, and this one right here is going to be checkmarked all the time so that way it saves space on the phone. But by going back to the camera app, zooming in and out is really easy, and when iOS switches between the cameras, you'll never notice it and it is really smooth. Now, this is the camera app as any other iPhone, so there's really nothing new. But there is a new portrait mode for the front-facing camera and the back camera, which I must say works great in my experience and adds a new dimension and effect to each photo. Here in this photo I took, you can see the difference within each setting, which makes the face and other background detail change in contrast and also brightness. Then there's also the studio light and studio light mono, but without the studio, which is pretty neat and all done within iOS. Next up is battery life, and as of right now I am at 51%, and taking a look at the battery settings, since the last full charge I have used the phone for 4 hours and 20 minutes, so roughly a total of 8 hours and 40 minutes from 100% to dead. Now my standby time is 12 hours and 5 minutes, which is also pretty good. And also one last thing to note here is that this does feature wireless charging, and wow do I love it. Okay, that's going to wrap up the review over the iPhone 10. Hope you enjoyed, and if you did, the link to this phone will be down below, where you go and check it out. And also if you enjoyed this video, please smash the like button down below as it really helps out. And also please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, which you can find right here, and the latest video right here. I hope to catch you guys in the next video, and as always, stay classy.